we are going to do so much adventuring in this thing. Well, here it is, the first official Mike in the Woods adventure vehicle. It doesn't look like much of a road tripper yet, but give it time, we're gonna get this sucker all kitted out. It's a standard range, rear-wheel drive Model 3, 438 kilometers of range, and will be our test bed for a lot of the overlanding and camping projects involving EVs. Things like portable solar charging, long-distance road trips, and lots of other camping adventures. Earlier this week, I went to the Tesla store, went over the checklist to make sure everything was okay with the car, and accepted delivery. Yeah, man, excited doesn't even begin to describe it. The whole point of this channel is adventures with EVs. I need to put my money where my mouth is, so now I have my very own Tesla Model 3. It's no Cybertruck. It looks like it's just a small sedan, but you would be surprised how much space is actually in this thing. I know the car doesn't look like much right now, but we're gonna get this thing kitted out over the coming months, be a proper road tripping and adventure vehicle. And I'm curious what kind of videos you guys want to see me do with this thing. I've had a few interesting suggestions already. I know one guy wanted to see how this thing performs in winter when camping in the Tesla, when you have camp mode on, to see what the battery loss is like. I can make all the videos in the world about adventuring with electric cars, but if I don't actually own one myself, I'm talking out of my ass. I don't want to be that kind of YouTuber, so here we are. Obviously with this thing, we're not going on crazy backcountry roads where you're doing like technical rock crawling and like super off-road stuff, but for most well-developed roads, even like dirt roads and gravel roads, this thing is perfectly capable of doing it. We're gonna get into different sleep setups. We're gonna get into charging it in the middle of nowhere using nothing but solar or wind or hydroelectric or even thermoelectric. We're talking year-round camping. I want to do a coast-to-coast trip here in Canada in this thing. I want to go adventuring in the Northwest Territories and the Yukon in this thing. One of the things I want to prove is that the charging infrastructure for electric cars is a lot more further along and more developed than people might actually think. This thing has a lot more space than you might think. There's the front, which since this is an electric car, there's no motor up front, so I have extra storage up there. All I've got in there right now is my mobile connector. The trunk space is pretty large, and the rear seats fold all the way down for a full through fare from the trunk into the rear of the car, allowing for things like for me to be able to sleep in this car. Ironically, it's actually got more space for doing that than my Mazda 3 hatchback, and when it's needed, I do have access to overnight climate control without having to have the ignition on and the car running all night, because it's an electric car, it's always on, and it just pulls right from the battery. The inside of this thing is super clean, super simplistic. There's no instrument cluster up front. The tablet controls literally everything in this car. I've also got remote access with my phone, so I could do things like if I'm sleeping in a tent outside of my car and I hear something rustling outside, I can turn on the car's cameras and access them from my phone, turn on my headlights if it's at night, so I can basically get outside security cam of what's going on outside of my tent without having to actually get out. It's the little stuff like that that I really want to play around with this thing. You can tell I'm excited to get this thing out there and do some adventuring with it. And since this is a Tesla, we're also going to experiment with the self-driving capability. Oh boy, are we. So we're going to be able to do things like see if my Tesla Model 3 can get me completely from my apartment all the way to our campsite without any input whatsoever. I'm talking no steering, no foot on the pedals. Unless there's an issue that I need to take over for, this thing in theory should be able to get me from the edge of my parking lot all the way to wherever I want to go camping, road tripping, from coast to coast without any input whatsoever. This is going to be a huge feature of the channel going forward. I hope you guys are as excited as I am. So the question is, when will the first actual camping adventure in this thing be? Well, if you remember back to my New Year's update video I did last year, one of the things I promised is that if I had my Cybertruck, I would do at least one camping trip with it before the end of the year. Sadly, the Cybertruck has been delayed for probably at least another year for Canadian deliveries, let's face it, but I do have my Tesla Model 3, so let's see what the last few weeks of the year shake out.